We were betrayed by our fathers, the police commissioner and his deputies. It was the collusion of our own. Mayor John Lindsay, Commissioner Patrick V. Murphy, Deputy Commissioner Benjamin Ward, Chief of Department Michael Codd, and Congressman Charles Rangel, with the Minister Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam. 6 in total, the circle of 6. To understand the backstabbing fully, we have to go back in time, back to one of the most brutal periods in New York history, back to a time when 10 cops a year were systematically executed in cold and calculated hits, back to one of the most traumatic eras in the storied New York City Police Department past. The place, Harlem, New York. The time, April 14th, 1972. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York's finest retired and unfiltered podcast. I'd like to welcome Randy Jurgensen. Sir, it's an honor.
Thank you for having me on the show.
No, it's a pleasure. Randy, so I from what I read in the book, but could you just tell the audience where you grew up and how and why you decided to become a cop? I think we lost Eric. But if you could just go with that.
Well, I grew up literally on the streets of the city of New York, 123rd Street and Amsterdam Avenue, which is 2 blocks south of 125th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. And if you stood on 125th Street and Amsterdam Avenue and looked east, you could see the Apollo Theater. This is where I grew up. I'm the oldest son of parents who were superintendents. I was maybe 16 years of age, and I decided that I was going to join the military. I and about at least four others, we went to. I was pestering my parents, to sign me, and my dad, in order, to get me off of my mother, and I'm not making it sound like it sounds that there was arguments and fights and stuff like that. No. So she signed. So with 3 or 4 others, I went down to 42nd Street, and I went in and joined the military. And when they asked for my father's signature, I said that my father had died. And they didn't ask for a death certificate or anything. So I went into the military, and I was quickly sent up to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, where I was caught. They caught me, and the MPs put me on a bus from Massachusetts, a civilian bus, to the Port of Authority, where my father and a priest they met me. And my dad said that, he would sign if I would, stay home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I said, of course I would. And they signed. And on February the 20th, I made 17. And on February the 20th, which is my mother's birthday, off I went into the military to do 3 years. For money reasons, while I was in there, I was told that hazardous duty pay, you would get extra money, and one of them was for being a paratrooper. So I signed up right away to be a paratrooper, and I became a paratrooper. Yada yada yada, and I also signed up for extra pay for demolition. I became a demolition expert, and I found out that you can only collect hazardous duty pay once. So I was only collecting it once, and I got what they call FECOM orders, and they were going by my original, not legal age of entering into the service, and so you could not go into combat unless you were 18 years of age. So I found myself in Korea in October, and I would not be 18 until December. And so fought a few fights, got a few medals, got wounded, got a Purple Heart, and I was sent home, and I was discharged, and I was 19 years of age with 3 years service. So there was no money. There was absolutely no money whatsoever. You know, and a little side note, you know, I had earned some medals, and the last medal that I earned was a Bronze Star, along with the Purple Heart, and in a battle called Pork Chop Hill. I never got it. I never got the Purple Heart, and I never got it. It was an honest mistake. And guys, 56 years later, I got a call, and they sent me to West Point, which they closed down West Point, the whole museum, and a one-star general, a colonel, I don't know who the hell else was there. My family was there, and I was given the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star 56 years later. So, but in any case, I came home, and there was no work. I went back to I went back to collecting numbers, which was totally illegal. And of course,
Randy, I just want to stop you right there.
I got caught.
I just want to tell the public first how an honor it is that you were the recipient of a Bronze Star and also the Purple Heart. I mean, I served in Iraq with the United States Marines. Thank God I didn't get the Purple Heart. I didn't get wounded. I want to thank you for your service. It's an honor for the public to understand that you are the recipient of a Purple Heart, which means you were wounded in battle, and your service is commemorative and it's extremely important. And thank you so much. It's super impressive to hear that you actually lied about your age to serve in the military. So it's a great story. Really impressive.
But I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that has done that. So, collecting the numbers, and sure enough, I got caught, and yeah. So,
what happened when you got caught?
I got out of that one.
All right.
And so one day we're playing stickball. This guy, Mike Trainer, who's no longer with us, wound up as a cop. He wound up as the broom in the 32nd precinct. He never made a collar, never went out in the street. He was the broom,
So we know someone like that. A couple of people, right?
He showed up while we were playing stickball, and he had papers for the Department of Parks. He had for the post office, and he had for the police department. A lot of the guys that I talked to say, yeah, but the firemen, I don't remember the firemen. So, the police department called first. And so I went, and I passed the test, and you being the Purple Heart or whatever, you could get some extra points, even taking the sergeant's test or whatever it was. Being a veteran, they were going to give you like 5 extra points or something like that. I never took the points. So the one other thing that entered into this is that when I came home, I was given a 30% disability from the VA. A shattered eardrum. I lost some teeth. I had 3 or 4 operations very, very close to my spine, and so forth and so on. But if I was to take the disability, the police department would not take me. So I never took the disability, and I joined the police department. So to make it this long story short, I'm in the academy, and while I'm in the academy, look, I'm still collecting numbers, and now I'm steering to wire rooms.
Yeah.
of which my father was going to and my uncle. Of course, they're both arrested, and that would come up. That would come up later on as I was going to be a cop. So what happens, guys, is that I'm standing on the corner of 125th Street, and the people are coming up to me, and because they moved the wire room, they kept moving it, and they would give me the address, and I would say to the guys, "Oh, it's now located here. It's located here. Located here." And of course, I was being paid, and and the guys that collected the numbers before it went to the bank, they gave it to me, and I would bring it over to the bank. So I'm standing there, and one day, two guys come up to me, and "We got you. We know who you are. Get up against the wall." And I get up against the wall, and they say, "Collecting numbers, that we know what you're doing with the wire room and stuff like that. Come, you're in, kid." And I said, "Guys, can I tell you something?" And they said, "What?" I said, "I'm in the police academy. Can I show you my shield?" And and it was Tony Altameri and Sonny Israel. Those were the two cops. And the language that flowed after that: "What are you, fucking crazy? What are you doing? Are you nuts? Let me see that. Is that a real shield?" Well, long story short, they let me go, and I sort of stopped doing what I was doing. I go to the police academy. I graduate from the police academy. I get assigned to Spanish Harlem, the 2-5 precinct. As I'm walking into the 2-5 precinct, there is Sonny Israel and Tony Altameri standing on the steps, and nothing flat. The whole 2-5 precinct knew I was collecting numbers. This is what they did. And that followed me through the job forever. I'm telling you, they knew it. So I went into the 2-5. I made some, I lucked out. I made some pretty good collars. I got a medal, blah, blah, blah. And I was assigned to undercover narcotics. And I was street narcotics. I bought all over the city, $75 half loads. Most of it was junk, really shit. So I bought it, and I did that for about 18 months. I let my hair grow, blew my nose all over myself. And you have to remember back then, and I am talking 61, 62. Back then, every cop really looked like Eddie Egan. No cops looked like me. And the job was run entirely, completely by, if it wasn't Murphy, it was O'Brien. If it wasn't O'Brien, it was Fitzsimmons. I mean, it was just totally Irish, top to bottom, So undercover narcotics was very, very easy for me. I bought in Alphabet City. I bought in Harlem, wherever it was, because I didn't really fit the look of the New York City Police Department in 1960. So my last buy is in Alphabet City. And I go up, knock on the door, $75. I give it to him. And I'm going back downstairs, and I see sneakers and hands coming upstairs, and I know I'm in trouble. So I beat it back up, and I pounded into the guy's door. I pounded on his door, and I said, "You're next." And I ran up to the roof, and I went over the roof, three roofs, and I went down the fire escape, got out, and I walked out onto Delancey Street. You guys are cops. When something is not correct, your stomach is one of the first things that's going to tell you something's not right here. Something doesn't feel right. So I saw people like they were in a slow motion movie. They seemed to be wandering around, and it was predominantly Jewish. Ratness was there, and they were all looking at a black and white television. So I went into the 7th precinct, and I had to do the dance. So I go in. I'm undercover narcotics. A UF 61, a UF 28 is a day off, blah, blah, blah. And the sergeant says, "Okay." So he recognizes me, and I'm going to give him the junk. And I said, "Sarge," I said, "what's going on?" He just took a deep breath, and he looked back at me, and he says, "I don't know where the fuck you've been, but they just shot and killed the president of the United States." and that was
Wow.
the last buy that I made in narcotics. I mean, for 2 weeks the world stood still, including the police department. So after about 2 weeks, I get a call. To go over to the DA's office. Najari was there. And make a long story short, this is what you're going to do, Jurgensen. Homosexuals are being assaulted, kidnapped, shook down, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't happen as fast as this, but we got you an apartment on Bleecker Street. You're going to go over to Bleecker Street. You're going to live over there. You're going to ingratiate yourself, blah, blah, which I did. And it took me 6 months, 7 months. They became known as the Salt and Pepper Team that were doing this to the homosexuals. And I got lucky. I got them. And 24 hours after I got them, I got the Gold Shield. And I was assigned. I was assigned to the 26th precinct, which was 126th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, 1 block north of 125th Street. I mean, I grew up in that neighborhood. I'm assigned there. Now I have to take a minute here, and that will be the end of it. I'll answer questions that you'll pose to me. When I was a kid of 12 years of age, it was numbers. I was, but I was also delivering groceries. And I was delivering groceries out of a grocery store that was located on 123rd Street, 1 block south of the Catholic school that I attended, Corpus Christi, with George Carlin. George Carlin and I attended school together. I was delivering groceries there. And one day I got stopped, and it was 2 cops. And back then, I went in, I would pick up a box, and I would deliver it. In the box was cigarettes. In the box was beer, groceries, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And so I got stopped. And, there was some name calling, which I'm not going to go into. There was some name calling towards me. And they took the beer, and they took the cigarettes. And I went on, I finished the delivery, and I came back, and, I went to my father, and I said to my father, and my father said, you know what? Like, mind your business, that's it. So I did. And it would happen 2 more times. 2 more times it would happen.
Same cops?
So, I never forgot who they were.
Same cops did it to you 2 more times?
Huh?
The same cops did it to you 2 more times?
Yes. And I get assigned to the 26th precinct, right? I probably have a Gold Shield 24 hours. I walk into the 26th precinct. I go upstairs to the squad room, right? And as soon as I enter the squad room, who do you think I see sitting there? The 2 cops. I'm not proud of this, but I lost it. I went over the top of the desk. I really gave it to one guy really good. The second guy was trying to pull me off. I elbowed him. I caught him right in the nose. It began to bleed. And the detectives jumped on me and placed me under arrest. I was under arrest. The lieutenant came out, and before they started to process everything, they took my gun, they took my shield, and and we were all in the room. There was a big crowd, and there was a boss that was headed down, I guess, from the borough or whatever it was. And the lieutenant took me in the room, and he said, you're absolutely, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I swear before God, he said to me, we heard that you were taking numbers when you were in the police academy. I swear to God. And I said,
they never left you, huh?
No. So I said, okay, here's what happened. And I told them what happened. And I told them the name calling. And I told them that they stole the cigarettes, and they stole and they stole the beer from me, and blah blah blah, and so forth and so on. And he just sat back in there, and he said, you sure it's them that did it? I said, it's them that did it. I said, they did it. And all of a sudden, I was left in his office, right? And he came outside. He came back inside. This took about an hour and a half. And he said, here's your shield, here's your gun. He said, you're not working here anymore. You will get it. As far as I know, I was the only cop or detective that was transferred on a teletype. There were no orders transferring me from the 26th precinct. And you know where they sent me, guys? They sent me to the 2-8 precinct. And I would wind up doing 17 years in the 2-8 precinct, wound up in the DA's office chasing the Black Liberation Army. But I was working on the Black Liberation Army on April 14th, 1972. And if that's what you want to ask me, what happened that day or whatever, so we can go from there.
Absolutely. Randy, could you just explain for everybody who the Black Liberation Army is to you, like as a whole, the organization?
Okay. For as long as I was in the 2-8 precinct, it was located between, the old 2-8 was located between 7th and 8th Avenue and on 123rd Street. So if you went over to 8th Avenue and you made a right going down 8th Avenue, halfway down the block between 123rd and 122nd, there was a storefront there, and it was the Panthers. The Panthers were the storefront there. As long as I was in the 2-8 precinct, I was very, very aware of Mosque number 7, which was located on 116th Street and 8th Avenue, right? Minister Louis Farrakhan's mosque. I knew it was a militant mosque, and most of what was coming out of the mosque was hate. And it was hate towards the Jewish people. There were name calling. He called them kikes. That was what really was coming out of the mosque. And being in the military, as I was, I recognize, and you do, when you work in a precinct, and this is not a racist remark, where it happened to be all Black, and 80% of them were doing heroin, nodding out on the street and so forth and so on. When you see somebody that's dressed in a suit that doesn't fit, but a white shirt and a red bow tie, you know damn full well, they're not reflective of the neighborhood. They're not, and I'm positive there were white neighborhoods that were the same way with the heroin users and so forth and so on. I'm not separating the people. So I saw that immediately right away. And so did everybody else, I never had any trouble with the mosque except once. There was a guy in Harlem Hospital that was damn near beat to death. And I went up to interview him, and he said, the Muslims did it. The Muslims did it. And so I took the report. I mean, he was beaten. I took the report, and naturally, I went with my partner, and I went and I knocked on the door of Mosque number 7. And I was greeted by a man called Captain Josephs. His nickname is Yusuf Shaw. If there was anybody, and I would say this to both of you, and I know what you were and who you are, if there was somebody formidable, for you to worry about, eye level, meet you out in the street, this was a guy, believe me. Not those standing out there with the bow tie. But this guy, Captain Josephs, right? I would learn he ran the mosque, the FOI, the Fruit of Islam. So I said to him, I have this complaint from this guy and everything like that. And he said to me, he says, detective, he says, I don't have her here right now, but I would like to show you. And he called her sister something or whatever it was. And this guy, that was his girlfriend or his wife, sent her to the hospital, broken nose, this, everything else that there really was wrong with her, right? And he said, we took care of the problem that was here in the mosque, the way he phrased it and stuff like that. So I said, okay. So it was almost like a wash. And I put out, if there's any further developments on the DD5, if there's any further developments in this case, blah, 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 it will be investigated and blah, blah, blah. I didn't put down what they did and so forth and so on. So was it a favor to the mosque? No, it really was not. I knew where this was going to go, where this was actually going to go. So that was my only encounter with the mosque. So come, and I knew about the Panthers. Now every May for all the years that I was there, before April the 14th, don't forget, I got there in 1963 to the 2-8. So every May, the Panthers would come around, especially in 1968. I'll never forget that, when Martin Luther King was here. And they would stand outside the 2-8 precinct, lock arms, and sing a bridge over troubled waters. I wanted to kill Simon and Garfunkel. They played it loud, and they would march into the 2-8. They did get into the 2-8, but they didn't get upstairs. We would put the lockers down at the top of the stairs, and because the lockers all contained the cops' guns. And no arrests were ever made, and that's what the Panthers did. And as quick as they did that, they made their point. They would leave and then go back. So that was my dealing. That was my dealing with the Panthers. That was my dealing with the mosque. So once again, in 1969, 1970, Artie Plate and Charles Stewart, a sergeant, a black sergeant, Artie Plate, white, the chauffeur, they were triangularly shot upon. And when I got to the scene, I absolutely knew that the people in the street, in that neighborhood, they were not capable of doing this.
Randy, I just want to stop you right there for a moment, just so the public is aware where we're at. So you got up to the point in 1969, you told us about the Black Liberation Army, about the Black Panthers, which I think is great. So at this point, you said there was, they had formed the triangular point, they've gotten shot at. At this point, is this the Cardillo incident? Is this something related?
No. This is 1969, 1970. Plus,
right.
And neither one of them were hit. And plus they did it again. They did it again to a car. A good friend of mine, Joe Mazzilli, Vietnam veteran, working in the 2-8. They called it sniper fire into the radio car, right? So,
Randy, is this just random, or are these in response to like 911 calls? Or are these just random shots at cops?
That's what I was asking.
No, this is random.
This is just random. The guys are driving.
Never called to this place. No, this was random. This was definitely random. And I caught both of those cases. For whatever the reason, I got both of those. I got both of those cases, and I didn't have to convince the guys that I was working with, but I tried to convince like the superior officers, stuff like this, that And I said it. I said I suspect the Panthers, of doing this. Is good weaponry. This is not a Saturday night special that's happening here. So, but all of that was going on. But I have to tell you, the 2-8 was then dubbed. It was the 7-9 was To Live and Die in Bedford-Stuy. The 4-1 was Fort Apache, and the 2-8 was the Murder Factory. So there was so much work with the homicide. We got 102 homicides for 4 years straight. 102
Shit.
just in our precinct. When they were killing 2,000 people a year in the 70s, the 2-5, the 3-2, and the 2-8 made up the 6th division. We got 500 of them. We had 500 of those homicides, all ground balls,
Right.
except when they started killing the cops.
You had a fourth of all the homicides in New York City?
Yeah.
1/4 out of the 2-8?
Yes, for 4
And
years.
these are small precincts too. I mean, this is
No, the 2-8 is the smallest.
right.
The 2-8's the smallest. The 3-2, yeah. But the 6th division would fit into Fort Apache. It would fit into the South Bronx. Yeah, there was no picnic up there, and the 7-9 was no picnic, believe me. So once again, I then, in 1971, this is a full year before Phil Cardillo, Piagentini and Jones are killed. And look, the mission papers come in. There's no two ways about it. And this was the first that I really heard of the Black Liberation Army. That's the first that I heard. And the mission papers came in, and it was signed by 21-year-old Twyman Myers and 26, 27-year-old Joanne Chesimard. Yeah. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you about the Black Liberation Army guys, right? Most of them, and you appreciate the time, 1971, 72, most of them were going to community college. Yes, they were. Joanne Chesimard's parents, which I interviewed along with an FBI agent, they were well-educated people, not because they were Black. I'm saying, no, they were educated people. I mean, Joanne Chesimard really didn't lack for too much growing up of anything. I never could figure out Twyman Myers. Twyman Myers was just a stone killer. So I remember getting there. I remember getting there that night, and of course I undressed Piagentini and so forth, and I saw where the gunshots were and so forth and so on. And from that point on, which was 1971, May of 1971, I was yanked out of the 2-8. I was yanked out of the 2-8, and Seidman said to myself, to Nick Cirillo, Tom Toomey, Mike DeSalvatore, and the other guy's name always escapes me. And Seidman said to us, and of course, this is a week or two later, after that horrible night where I met Diane, the wife, and so forth. Seidman says, exact words, go get these bastards, don't come home until you get them. And for 2 years, that's what we did. I went to Atlanta, I went to St. Louis, I went to Denver, I wound up in San Francisco, where, not by myself, where we got bottoms in Washington. We missed Herman Bell a few hours. And along the lines, I kept missing Joanne Chesimard. So I was working on the Black Liberation Army when I was sitting at 125th Street on April the 14th, 1972. I was sitting on the Black Liberation Army when the 1013 came over from the mosque and Phil Cardillo.
So, Randy, before we get into April 14th, I just want to clarify, for the public, because we do have a lot of people that aren't cops that listen, Seidman is the chief of detectives at the time. right? Seidman's the chief of detectives for the entire department, correct?
Yeah, Seidman, yes.
He's the chief of detectives.
Of course, Seidman's the chief of detectives for the Cardillo case. Yes, he is.
Yes, and for Piagentini, could you just describe briefly just those events too, so the public knows how these officers were murdered, like the deaths of those officers, that case, and how and how the Black Liberation Army is tied into that.
You know, I'm very I'm very reluctant to even go into detail.
All right, don't even do it then.
In fact, when Baden was on the stand, we'd asked the family, to please leave the courtroom, but okay. All right, here's what happened.
If you don't want, just briefly, just an overview. Okay. I don't want to upset you. Just
so Piagentini and Jones had never worked together. The whatchamacallit, the people in that sector, one was in court and the other one was sick, so it was an empty radio car, and so Piagentini and Jones were put into the radio car. They were seasoned. They were seasoned cops, and what the Black Liberation Army would do, we didn't know that at this point. What the Black Liberation Army was doing, they were calling 1013s at various locations, and I'm telling you, they were well done, and they would time how long it took for the radio cars to get there for the 1013. So how many practice runs, I don't know. So one night they decided in the projects, and a call comes in that it's a domestic dispute. And so Piagentini and Jones, they respond, they cross over, not even their sector, they cross because the sector was doing something else. And guys, you're on the job, you did all the time. The domestic, you know what it is. He's had too much to drink. And by the time you get there, she don't want him arrested. But okay. So what? So they get out of the car and they're walking, and as they go walking, triangularly fired again, and they are relieved of their weapons, and their weapons are used against them. Their own weapons are used against them. And Piagentini's gun is taken as a trophy. It's kept as a trophy. Now, when I got the call, I did not go to the scene. And I have a habit of doing that because the answer is in the hospital. I did the same thing. I left the mosque and I told Seidman, I'm going to the hospital to interview the cops that were there. That's where the answer is at this point. So I didn't go to the scene. I went to Harlem Hospital. I mean, it looked like half of Manhattan North was there. So I got there, and the crying, the yelling, the screaming, and stuff like that. And I met Sergeant Kirkland, the second whip, and I said to him, "Are we talking to them?" And he said to me, Jones is in the operating room. He said, and Piagentini's downstairs. They do have a morgue, if you will, at Harlem Hospital. So I went down there, and there were 2 or 3 detectives down there, and I undressed them. I undressed them. I, I I noted quite quickly that there was no gun. That was the first thing, and that's not the first time that that happened. Um, so I noticed that there was no gun, and the he'd been shot and mutilated. I'll tell you that now. And so Jones, while I was down there, I don't know who brought the news that Jones died. I never did get to see Jones. I didn't. So upon doing that, I then went over to the locker, and I broke into his locker, and I took out, what I had to take out, and we weren't vouchering anything at that particular time. We were still in in the steps of it. And then here's the hard part, guys. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. I'm with the mayor. I'm with the police commissioner, and the chief of detectives, and down a long hallway. Here comes Diane Piagentini, mother of three, all under the age of 7, and the mother of 3, and she's coming down the hall, and she's accompanied by a priest, and I don't remember if there was a PBA delegate or not, but they went and got her. They went and got her, and the introduction and so forth and so on. And she looked directly at me and she said, "Can I see my husband?" And I said, I said, "Mrs. Piagentini," I says, "not at this time." I said, "Yes, of course." I said, "He's not alone. He's with people." And I really forget really what I say. And and then, of course, she's taken into a room, and they all went to sit down, coffee, cigarettes, and all that. And I left. And I left. Of course, I didn't go home. And I met a couple of other detectives there. And what I really wanted to get was, and I couldn't get it from the lieutenant that put them in the car and stuff like that. I was trying to get as much of that information of how they got there. I didn't know nothing about a domestic call. I knew nothing about that whatsoever. And the next thing that I knew, I had that. It wasn't my precinct. I had Piagentini, and they had formed up at that time. They had formed up what they called the Major Case Squad or the Major Crime Unit, whatever the hell it was, and it was operating out of 1 PP, and that's when they had, the Italian cops that went bad.
Yep.
All of those specialized units were okay. So I had Piagentini. I worked very close with Butler, who had Jones, and yeah, but it wasn't very long until the mission paper didn't come in, taking credit for it, war against this, war against that, so forth and so on. Now, this is 1971. This is a year away from the mosque. In 1968, there was such a riot at Columbia University, and they were burning the flag, and they're the ones that called us pigs. So, and we didn't go in there until we weren't invited, and that was after 3 days. And then we went in to Columbia University. I bring that story up to let you know, which you would probably do, or to let the people that are looking at this it was not a very good time to be a New York City cop wearing that blue uniform. You were pigs. You were this. You can't believe everything. And if you were a Vietnam veteran, you were being called baby killers. It just was. It all seemed to turn on a dime. And I will go to 1968. In 1968, it's only 5 years after we've killed the president. In 68, we're going to kill Kennedy, and we're going to kill Martin Luther King. So it just really, it was not a very good time, to be a cop. The name calling, blamed for every damn thing, everything that you could possibly think of. Don't forget Kent State, all of that, right? So with that in mind, I know that this is definitely like a hate crime. This is a war. This is definitely a war. It's not drug dealers that are getting even with these. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. And I will never stick up for the mob. I will go back. My best friend is Joe Pistone, Donnie Brasco,
Yep.
FBI, and I tell him, FBI stands for famous but incompetent. So
it was a good movie, though. It was a good movie.
They went to school. They went to school too long. That's why,
So I just know, it's got to be a far and away group. I would later learn on, this belongs in the conversation now, but I would later learn this very much. There was a picture, and it was called the Battle for Algiers. And that picture, black and white, that picture opens up that there's a cop. Of course, he's a French cop, and he's standing there, and what it shows is the cop is standing there. He's looking at the traffic, and a guy in civilian clothes, this is how the picture opens up, walks up, puts the gun behind the cop's head, shoots, and kills him, and then walks away. And the picture is about the following. It's Algiers, and they're trying to break away from France. And it's the France army that's occupying Algiers. It doesn't work. It continues. So France sends paratroopers. That doesn't work. And then suddenly somebody comes up with the idea, let's use the Algerian police. And so they prop up the Algerian police to stop the riots, to stop what was going on. And suddenly the Algerian police find that their families are being threatened and so forth. The Algerian police quit. 48 hours later, France left Algiers and they got their freedom. The Black Liberation Army was looking at that film, I can't tell you how many times. We hit a safe house in Denver, and there was the film. There was the film.
That was their manifesto.
And it all about cells and all about, that's what they fashioned themselves after. In other words, you can have your army, you can have your paratroopers, you can have this. If you don't have a police department, it collapses. And so that's what the war on cops was to be about with the Black Liberation Army. So all of that happened. All of that was going on. All of that was in the atmosphere. All of that was it the morning of April the 14th, 1972. And of course, I had been told, pick my team. I was given a shotgun, and there were two, I forget who had them right now, Jerome, Jerry, he would wind up driving the bus at the mosque. But yes, and here, but they were not. They were semi-automatic carbines, and we had them. And yes, I filed down the shotgun. I did, and I put the strap through the holster, and I carried that, and I wore a military jacket. I wore my army fatigues. Said I was a sergeant. You know, I put everything on there. I didn't put the Purple Heart. You know, the Combat Cross. All of it was there. And Jurgensen, I put my name. So that's what it was. April 14th, 1972.
So you guys are at war. I mean, the police department's at war. We're being assassinated.
Cops
are fully aware.
I promise you, we are. I promise you, we are. And you can't find a friendly face.
And
everybody hated us. Everybody.
And April 14th, 1972, before that call comes over, everybody's well aware at that point. We're at war. They're calling in fake jobs, and we're being assassinated. And if you could just again walk us through the incident of April 14th, where Philip Cardillo and 3 other officers enter Mosque number 7.
So I got the 1013, and that had been done before to pull us off. They, if they spotted us there, and let's say that somebody was in the building or whatever it was, they would call a 1013 at a different address. And of course, everybody goes on a 1013. So when the first call came over, and it was just quite this quick, there were 6 of us, and I sent 3. I told them, go. And we all had our own band. So when I'm talking to them, nobody in Manhattan North could hear us. We were on our own band. So I said, go. And so they started off. I don't think that they got 4 or 5 blocks away when the next one came over and it said shots fired. And when it said shot fired, I said, that's it. And I went. I drove across on 25th Street. I got blocked in by the traffic. So I zigzagged up on the sidewalk, and I went down Morningside Avenue. And I'm going to 102 West 116th Street. There's no way that I knew that was the mosque. I did not. I didn't know it. So I get to 116th Street. I'm exactly 2.5 blocks away from the mosque. And so I make the left, I go down, and I get to the next avenue over, which I believe is Manhattan Avenue. And I see the crowd, and I see and I could see it. I still don't know it's the mosque, but I couldn't go any further. So I got out of my car, and I had the shotgun. And in order to get through the crowd, I got the shotgun, and I got it above my head, and I'm running. And the people are in the streets. I mean, so and what I did, what any other detective would do, what you would do, as I'm running, I'm looking for that familiar face that when I can come back later on, to know what is going on. That stuff just comes to you if you're a cop, and if you let it, it will. A crime scene will speak to you if you let it. So I'm running down there. I'm looking for that familiar face, and I did see one. It was a female, and I did see that familiar face. And I'm going, and then I realized it was the mosque. And once I knew it was the mosque, I could spend the next 15 minutes of telling you what was going on in my stomach and what was going on in my head, and none of it was good. I'm going to tell you that. None of it was good. So now I get there, and the first thing that I see is the commanding officer of the 2-8. And we know each other. Randy, he says, is this your case? That's the first thing he said to me. And I said, no. I said, no. What's going on? And he said, this is one who was shot. And, there are a couple of guns missing and so forth and so on. And they hadn't called off the 13. But they called it off, and they called it on, and they hadn't called it off. Look, so it was not by me. So it was called off, and I went into the mosque. I opened up the door. I went into the mosque, and all I saw were bullet holes, and I saw blood. I saw that both windows were broken. It's just observation. That's all it is.
This was on the first floor, right?
It's not being,
Randy?
yes, right. It's not being this great detective. I observed these things, and so I went downstairs. And when I went, and I'd never been there, and I went downstairs, and there I saw a group of cops. I can name them, and they had maybe 10 or 12, and they were Muslims up against the wall over there. Rudy Andre actually had handcuffs on one right there. So I said to Rudy, I said to Rudy, and I said to the other one, I said, what do you know what happened here? No, Phil's upstairs. Phil's upstairs. He's badly beaten in this. They didn't know Phil was shot. None of them knew Phil was shot, including Vito, his own partner. So I remember you talking about that in your book. I came back upstairs, and of course, I saw the commanding officer, and I said to him, I said, this is a crime scene. You got to protect it. You got to do that. I exactly said that to him. Okay. So here comes a round of bosses, and all they want to know is, okay, what happened? And they want to be talking to the detective that was there, and I was not the only detective. So I said, no. I said, nope. The answer is at the hospital. I got in my car, and I went over to the hospital, and it was a triage. Cops, plenty of cops there. So it's important at this time. My father was in charge of the maintenance department of St. Luke's Hospital, and there wasn't a doctor or anybody who didn't love my father. He was very popular. Well, so I went over to St. Luke's, and as I'm going into St. Luke's, there's my dad, and he, are you all right? Is everything okay? And I said, yeah, Dad, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I said, what, we're the emergency room and stuff like that. And my father's walking me over there, and he says to me, he says, we're setting up a room. We're setting up a room for the mayor who's coming, and we're setting up a room for all of the other dignitaries that are coming. My father said that to me in St. Luke's. And I go around to the emergency room, and I want to paint this picture. It's nothing but bed up against the wall, and the curtains are drawn out from each bed. And the first one that I get to is I get to Padilla and Negron, thank you. Negron and Padilla. And Negron is standing there. He's got his gun in the air, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, they got his gun. They got my partner's gun. They got his gun. And there's a sergeant there. Look, these guys are dead. They're not there. And I don't think that Padilla was fit for duty. Can we let it go at that?
Yep.
Okay.
Understood.
So,
Understood. Not Padilla, I beg your pardon, Negron. And
understood.
So I said, all right. So I went over, and I said to Negron, I says, give me the gun. Give me the gun. And at that point, Negron began to convulse, and he was almost convulsing right off the table. So they grabbed him, the orderlies, the doctors, they were holding him They were and he was just out of it, and he was beaten. He was just out of it, and once again, he didn't have his gun. I didn't see Padilla's gun. So now I went around. I went around to the next one, and there was Rudy Andre, and he was beaten, and he was bleeding. And then I went to the third one, and Rudy Andre, how he got there after I saw him downstairs at the mosque is still a mystery to me. So I went to the third one, and there was Vito, and his first words were, "Randy, they shot Phil. They shot Phil." And I said, "Vito," I said, "this hospital has a reputation," and I testified, "this hospital has a reputation of never losing a cop. So don't worry about that." Now, from his eyeballs and his mouth and his ears, Vito was bleeding. And they were taking care of him, and he was bleeding. I didn't know it at the time, but the fracture in the ankle. And so I said to him, I said, "Vito, you got to come back with me to the mosque." Okay. I said, "Vito, you really have to come." And the nurse, whatever the nurse was saying, she says, "No, he can't. The doctor needs to go. We're going to have X-rays." And I said, "Vito, you're going to come with me?" And he said, "Yes." Now, I want to tell you something about Phil Cardillo. When I was a uniformed cop in East Harlem, I used to go into this. Yeah, I'm doing this to death. I used to go into a place called Ideal Florist, and it was Frankie and Tessie. And Tessie was Phil Cardillo's aunt. But that's not the reason I went in there, because I didn't even know about Phil Cardillo. I went in there because Frankie was taking numbers, and I would play my numbers in uniform. So I used to hit, guys. I used to hit. So one day, Phil's in there, and Frankie's telling me, "Look, he wants to be a cop, and he wants to be able to use your name and everything." And I said, "Yeah, sure, go right ahead." That was Phil Cardillo. I totally forgot about that, never even remembered it, yada, yada, yada. So that's the Phil Cardillo story that I knew him. So I get this towel, and I soak this towel as wet as I can. And I put the towel all around Vito's head, wet. The water's running all over the place. And I said, "Come on, Vito, we're going back to the mosque." And he says, "Okay." And the nurse walked away. She left. But she went to tell the doctor, I have no idea. So now I'm walking Vito out, and there's cops, and they see it. And boy, the language, and we're going to do it. We're going to, oh boy. So I'm getting Vito out. Lo and behold, I'm walking out to the vestibule, and there is standing the police commissioner, the mayor. Benjamin Ward wasn't there. He was still at the scene. And there was somebody else. I really don't, I don't know who it was. And once again, a backstory. This is 1972. I received like the Combat Cross and a few others for a shooting having nothing to do with the Black Liberation Army that I had to do with. And I was getting a medal. And I refused to get that medal from the mayor. I wouldn't take the medal from the mayor or the police commissioner. And that made a big stink. So it was Sergeant Kirkland, the second whip in the 2-8. I said, "I'll take the medal from him." And I took the medal from him. Now,
why wouldn't you take it, Randy? Could you what was it?
Lindsay and them, they believed, and I'm sort of cutting to the chase here, and I'm exaggerating, but the cops that were being killed, they believed there was some form of corruption in there. That the cops were doing something or whatever it was.
So you felt they didn't have your back
from them, but that was the atmosphere. That was the atmosphere.
You felt they didn't care about you guys.
Oh man, come on. So he calls me
Sounds
over.
very familiar.
detective. Oh boy, does it. He says, detective. And I leave Vito standing there. I couldn't find a chair. So I went over and he said to me, he said, what, you were over there? And I said, yes, sir, I was. I didn't realize how tall Lindsay was. Lindsay was a big man. He got to be 6'2" or 6'3", and how the mayor, how our police commissioner. So I said, yes, I was over there, and he said everything's under control. He says everything is under control over there, and I said, when I left there, I said they were still calling 1013s. I said there was a lot of people in the street, and I remember distinctly saying that, and I testified before the grand jury with that. And he said to me, "There's no riot over there," and I said, "I never said there were." Your Honor, I said, "I never said there was a riot over there." And Lindsay looked down, and the police commissioner said, "No. There's no riot over there. It's all under control. I spoke to the people that are over there. No, there's no riot over there." And I said to him, I said, whatever.
They're all trying to paint the narrative already. That's the narrative.
Whatever.
Nothing.
If you
Everything
want
is
to
fine
believe,
over there.
if you want to, and I know you're believing everything I say, and I can substantiate it. So I get out, and I'm going down with Vito. Day later, whatever it was, a lieutenant comes to me from the police commissioner's office and says to me, you can't talk to the police commissioner that way. And I said, what way? You can't tell the police commissioner whatever and walk away. I said, well, I did say that. I said, whatever. I said, you know what the conversation was? And the lieutenant says, Randy, I'm on your fucking side all the way with those people. But you can't do that. And I said, okay, Lou. I said, well, do I apologize? He said, no, it's done and it's over with. For saying whatever.
Whatever.
Okay.
Now Randy, you would get along great with John and I. We don't play well with politics either.
so
Randy, and just real quick, could you just tell everybody why you're taking Vito there? Like, so people understand you're taking him there to do an ID, right?
Well,
so.
obviously, Phil is shot. I mean, Vito's there. Rudy Andre is there. Whatever cops were in the hospital, and of course, I never did get a chance to talk to Negron. I didn't get a chance to talk to Negron as to what was going on, and we as detectives, we have questions, and they are there. They have the answers to our questions, And of course, it's going to come up that, first of all, Phil shot himself. Phil shot himself. Mike Bodden, as far as I'm concerned, he can walk on water, if not part it. What he did with a dummy and to show that Phil couldn't shoot himself. So this is why I'm bringing Vito back. Now I get to the door, and there is Benjamin Ward and a Muslim, which I don't know. And they're standing there. They're standing there at the door. And Benjamin Ward says to me, no uniformed personnel allowed in the mosque. And I got Vito with this towel. And I said, all right. I said, okay. I could have said, I'm going to go home and get a uniform. I didn't do any of that shit. So I said, okay. I said, but he's going in there. And Benjamin Ward looked over at whoever this was. It wasn't Captain Joseph's. Looked over and he said, yeah, he can go in. He could go in there. So that was my first inkling. Here's the man. He's the highest ranking man on that. Okay. So Vito goes in there, and I'm saying, please, God, Vito, get it. And I also said, Vito, Seidman's down there. Seidman is down there. You go. Next thing I know, and they're all down there, and I'm hooked up with my unit now. And of course, the streets are, and
Very
Big
nice.
Bertha's there. Big Bertha is there.
The ESU truck, right? That's what you guys called Big Bertha, the emergency service truck.
Yes, yes. Loudspeakers, the whole thing. And when I went away, the cops were ringing the mosque. When I came back, it was the Muslims. And the cops were on the far corner. And the people were doing whatever they wanted to do. They overturned my car. They overturned the other car. There were some small fires, but the main stuff, there was stuff now being off the roof, coming off the roof. So Benjamin Ward gets on Big Bertha, takes the microphone, and his first words were, "All white cops return to their command." He said it more than 2 or 3 times, and and he used the word black, and all black cops remain on site. Now I'm out in the crowd, and one of the cops came to me, and it might have been my own team, and said, "What's a block cop? A block? What is a block cop?" And always remember, guys, and you're in the military, the police department is a semi-military organization. A command given or an order given, it's expected to be obeyed. We are a semi-military organization. So I said, no, he's saying black cops. And, they were dumbfounded. The cops were dumbfounded. Return to your command. So what that would do would leave the 2-8. And half of them were over at the hospital. And the other half were downstairs with prisoners, they thought. So that's what it was. Now, later on, I would find out that there were the bosses outranked the 12 black cops that stayed. Now, there was one car from the 3-2 where they were black and white. And the white guy didn't want to leave and so forth and so on. And, and they exchanged ammunition. I testified to that they left. And so when they left, right, I took my team and I walked away. Only to find that the car had been overturned. And but so I walked away. Now, we still have our radios. Hal, the commander of the 2-8, calls me on the radio and says, "Jurgensen," and he gives the number 10-2 or 10-1. I forget what it is. That means meet me.
Yep.
That means
10-2.
so.
You got a good memory. You got two right. 10-2.
10-2 the command.
Right.
I left my team. I went back up, and he said, "Randy, somebody's going to be killed. Somebody will be killed. You have to go up on this roof." And by now, there was some bricks coming off, and there was a bus with people that were trapped in there. There was a bus. It couldn't go forward. He says, "You got to go up on the roof and stop that." And I said, "Okay." So I went back up and through. And of course, once he said about white cops leave, now it became a snake dance. And you guys know what a snake dance is. And oh, man. So, and there was some looting, and it's their own stores. So I took the team and I went, and I made it a military operation. And I went in there on the ground floor, and I found the stairs, and I went up to the first floor, while D'Alessio stayed with a carbine on the ground floor. And so everybody, they're not coming. Once I got to the first floor, and he scampered up there. And now I went to the 3rd floor, and I left 2 because there were people that were living in the building and they were coming out. So I left 2, and I left the guys with the carbines. I left them there. And then I made the roof. And once I made the roof, I called them. I called them, "Come on up." And they stood by the doorway of the roof, right? And they stood like in a military thing. They were down with the carbines pointed at the door. And the first person that I saw was the guy in the dashiki, 5% something. The guy I name him in the book. I saw him. But they closed the door. and it was kids. They dismantled, and once they saw me, they saw us. They got rid of the bricks that were now coming down. The bricks were now the bricks also the bricks stopped. And the other thing is, if you've ever been in combat, helicopters play a big part in combat. That helicopter came so low over 116th Street, the dust was coming up from the roof and stuff like that. And I was just waving my badge. I was waving my badge at the guy with the helicopter. Boy, so he sort of backed off. And as soon as he backed off, there was the door. And here comes the inspector. And he came through the door with his chauffeur, and he came with 5X Kenyatta, 5X Kenyatta in the dashiki. And as he came out, right, the people behind him. So I know you're looking at me. So now just be me. What I'm seeing is him coming out, and then all the people from the street coming out, and they're going around the roof, all going around the roof, forming like a semicircle. And we're all the way in the back. We're in the back. So we're not surrounded because we got the back of the roof on it. But if there was one person, there was 50, maybe more. And the guy comes over, the cop comes over, and he said, I have to search you. And I said, you have to do what? I have to search you. So D'Alessio was there, and D'Alessio said, you're not searching me. You're not searching me. And the guy says, I have orders to search you. And I said to D'Alessio, I'll handle this. I said, I'll handle this. I said, all right. I said, you want these weapons, the carbine and the rifle. And he said yes. And I said, I'm not giving up the carbines. I said, I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm not giving up the carbines. But Randy, I will give up. I was afraid that those carbines would wind up in the hands if they ever stormed us. So yeah, that's I wasn't being obstinate. I was thinking that. So I said, but you can have the shotgun. So I broke the shotgun down, but I kept the numbers on the. It wasn't the breech; it was the handle. I kept that. So I gave them the wood and I gave them the barrel. But I kept this. I didn't keep that. I was afraid there was getting in the crowd. I kept that to show that this was a legitimate gun issued by the police department. So they took it. They took it, and he turned around and he walked off, and we were on the roof with 50 to 60 people. And there was only one way off that roof. So I said to the guys, okay, follow me. And I went to D'Alessio and I said, do not, under any circumstances, I said, give up that carbine. I said, damage it before you give it up. We're gonna be up, we're gonna go. And we started. And we started down the stairs with them following me. And they did part, they were parting, we were going down, there was names, and yes, they were spitting, they spit on us, and we were going down. And as we made it to the first landing, and somebody threw, and I'll never forget that, somebody threw a Pepsi can. And the Pepsi can hit one of the guys. No damage done, but that was it. That's what did it. Then they rushed us. And I was using the the weapon to get out. And we made it out into the street. And we went for the radio cars. And I made it into the radio cars when, again, it was San Pedro said, they got Jerome. We didn't call him Jerome. They got Jerry. And I looked, and they had Jerry, the black cop. They had him. So back out we went. No cops. There were no cops there. So we just our crew. We went back out there, and we got Jerry. And yet we did some damage. Getting, swinging, doing. Yes, we did. And so we got back out, and I got into the radio car, and they crashed in the window in the radio car. It was like a boom, unbelievable. So I got out of the radio car, and unbeknownst to me, there's a guy standing on top of the radio car. And then Louis D'Alessio and them were behind me. And the guy let go. And that bag that you see in the picture is a brick. And that brick hit me. And as it hit me, at the same time, Louis D'Alessio is firing a shot. I was totally convinced I was shot. I was totally convinced I was shot. Now, some of the rest of it gets a little blurry to me, but somehow or the other, they dragged me over. We made it to the bus. We made it to the outside of the bus. And of course, you got to throw some humor in here. My wife to this day would probably run off with Elvis Presley and leave me, and on the side of the bus is this big Elvis Presley sign on the bus with me standing there, blood coming out of all of it. But there's Elvis Presley. So we made it onto the bus, and I kept saying to D'Alessio, I'm shot. And I said, I don't want my father to see me like this. I don't want my dad to see me like this. And then I saw all these hands coming into the bus. And then, like, all bets were off. And so I took out the remaining 2 guns, and the first person through the door on those buses, that was it. And then Jerome, he ran to the front of the bus, took the bus driver out of the seat, and he drove the bus up onto the sidewalk, and on the corner was a newsstand and a telephone, and he took it out. And he drove the bus clean across 116th Street. And when we got across 116th Street, of course, the people and stuff, but they unloaded the bus, and I went by radio car to St. Luke's Hospital. And when I got to St. Luke's Hospital, they came out with the gurney, and I refused to get on the gurney. I didn't want my father to see me like that. Remember, I'm shot. And I started to walk, and I went down. I did some damage to my knees and to my forearm. I went down on the sidewalk, and then they put me on the gurney. And dear God, there was my father. And I kept saying, Dad, I'm sorry. Dad, I'm sorry, and so forth and so on. And then I learned I wasn't shot. And that's the first time I learned that I wasn't shot. And they also found and treated for a human bite. I had a human bite on my neck. And down in the next 2 were, there was Ray San Pedro and Louis, but they were let go. They were let go on the first day, and I was in the hospital for, I guess, 4 days. And Joy Cardillo would come every morning before going down the hall to see Phil, to see how I was, and so forth and so on. And here's something else that's a memory that to this day, 1PP and them can't get it. When I really came around at one time, because I was in and out of it, when I really came around, I found my room full of 11 black cops. The only white cop in there was Jimmy Aricchio. And they were smoking cigars and fooling around with the nurses. And they came over to me. They showed me the newspaper, and they were all black. And they said, little brother, we're going to take care of this. And they were all black. So on the 4th day or so, and Ray Kelly, by the way, was in charge of the detail, who would be the police commissioner, Ray Kelly. He was in charge of the detail of keeping the cops outside our doors for all of us that were in the hospital. Forget Phil, the PVA was all over that. So my father came to me and he said, son, Phil's not going to make it. Phil is not going to make it. And I said, okay. I said, thank you, Dad. And I called Jimmy Aricchio, and I said to Jimmy, get my clothes. And I got my clothes, and I said, You got to get me out of here. And I got dressed and I went down the hall and I said goodbye to Phil. And it's strange enough, Joy, they weren't there. The PBA delegates were there. And I quietly said goodbye to Phil and I left. And Seidman never forgave me. Seidman never forgave me. So the next that I saw him was at the funeral. And boy, he reamed me a new one. You know, we were looking, we didn't know where you went, and but we don't ever do this again, and blah, 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 blah. And that's when they all swore, and I was there. They all, after the people left, they all swore on the coffin before the coffin would go down. We'll never forget you, Phil. We'll never forget you. And out of that came, remember, Cardello. They were there. Vito was there. Rudy was there. The PBA delegates, which were great, Bart Gorman, they were all there. They were all there. Sam DeMilla didn't swear on the coffin, but yeah. So they did it. The 2-8 guys did it. So, and then Seidman said to me as I was getting back to the car, and he said, "You can't get that team again. You can't get that team again." He says, "But get a team." He says, "As soon as you're back," he says, "get that team, and you're on the Black Liberation Army." I went to back to work on the Black Liberation Army. So now we go back to the precinct, and we go back to the precinct, and the commander. You gotta go?
Yeah.
Oh, and the commander of the 2-8 precinct, Jack Howe, he drops his shield just like in High Noon. That caused a lot of confusion. He quit. Seidman, about a week later or whatever it was, and I interviewed Seidman for the book. I went down to Florida to do it, and Seidman quit. And then a very powerful person, which is the DCPI, on Sunday, he quit. But I didn't have the case at that. I was doing Black Liberation Army for 1 year. And after the shootout with Twyman Myers, and I identified Twyman Myers, I rolled him over and I said, yes, that's Twyman Myers. After that, I went back to my house, and of course my wife was there. She said, you got a phone call. And the phone call was from, and I can't, he's such a good friend, Tom Nerney. In any case, and he said, meet me at 1 pp. Meet me at 1 pp tomorrow. This was 2-3 hours after the shooting of Twyman Myers, and so I had to go to 1 pp. And guys, I met him in the bathroom. In the bathroom at 1 pp. He had a cop go into the bathroom to make sure there was nobody in the bathroom. And then he and I went into the bathroom, and the cop stood outside, and it was a lengthy conversation. And he said to me, you have the Phil Cardello case. You're being assigned to the Phil Cardello case. And that's how I got the case. And that's how, and that was
in
it.
the bathroom.
Yes, in the bathroom. I promise you, in the bathroom.
Randy, I just want to. I'm sorry, Eric. I just want to summarize real quick. So there's a crime scene. We have a cop shot. We have 3 cops injured. A deputy commissioner from the NYPD impedes in the investigation, doesn't allow cops in, right? Doesn't allow cops in. There's an active riot going on. You were already told prior that it wasn't a riot. You go up to help clear a roof during the riot as they're throwing bricks down, and an inspector from the police department comes up there, disarms you guys, leaves you for dead. You fight your way through there. You go back to get treated yourself. You're a victim of that riot yourself, and so is everybody on that scene. Your fellow brother was assassinated. And the police department basically, and now here you go. You know that the world's against you, the mayor, the commissioner, there's all this political play against you. Everything's at work. And now you're assigned this case. And Eric, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have something?
No,
I
no,
just want to
no.
summarize it.
No, I was just summarizing. That was fantastic. I just want to ask, on the rooftop, was anybody there with the suit and tie that you described earlier? Was it orchestrated? Was it people from the neighborhood? Who was on that roof?
Well, on that roof, obviously, was a deputy inspector and his chauffeur, and I gave you his name, it escapes me. 5X Kenyatta, and he had a sword. He had the sword, and he's dressed in the in the garb and stuff like that. He really just stood there. He didn't say anything, but yes.
But it seemed like they were together.
Oh,
right.
Oh, no,
it was
no doubt about it.
It was orchestrated, right? They definitely spoke together and planned out that they were going to go disarm you.
Yeah, no two ways about it. And by the way, when I got back working, and this could be a month later, I got a call. In fact, I got several calls. Come over and pick up the shotgun. I wouldn't. I didn't go over and pick up the shotgun. I didn't. Finally, I did, but no, I didn't. And
so, I just want to ask: at this point, with this riot, with the incident that you had, did you guys have a manifest at this point of the Black Liberation Army? Was there some type of manifest of the security at the mosque? What type of literature did you guys have? And when you started this case, did you have something to prepare yourself, or you had to go in cold?
I went cold. No, I went cold. No, I absolutely went cold for the one and simple reason. I mean, there was nothing to work off of. There really was nothing to work off of. Newspaper accounts had better than what was put down by the police department. Now, do I know this as a fact? But I've heard it too many times from people that I respect. They made out the unusual, and the unusual went to the division, and it was sent back. Why? No, redo it. So they made it out again, and it went to the borough. The borough sent it back. You know why? We had to take out the word riot and substitute disturbance. So we put in disturbance, and now the unusual went down to wherever it goes.
And Randy, in your opinion, because in a normal situation, that crime scene would have been held. Everyone there would have been held, right? You would have walked in with Vito to do an ID, right, of the people that were there. In your opinion, if that crime scene was held and not interfered with by the higher-ups in the police department and the political pressure from the mayor and outside forces, do you believe the crime would have been solved that night, right then and there?
I don't know about solved, but it would have been put together. And what I'll draw reference to is a year ago, Piagentini and Jones, right? We knew nothing of a Black Liberation Army or anything until we got the mission paper. And what did we have there? And guess what? We solved that. Of course, when I say we, a whole bunch of great detectives that I worked with. Yes. Yeah, we had to go to St. Louis. Yes, we had to go to Atlanta. Yeah, but we solved that. I mean, let me give you an idea about the Black Liberation Army, and then we can end this. Nick Cirillo came to me one day, and he's the rock from Manhattan DA's office. He's the one that pulled me down to the DA's office. So he says to me, I got something. He says, but we're going to leave town. We got to leave town. I said, Nick, whatever you want. He says, he always said this. He says, tell the other half that you're not going to be home for 2 or 3 days. And I said, okay. The next thing I know, I'm in Denver. And of course, I knew a lot more. I go to Denver. The Torres brothers, they were very high on the Black Liberation Army, the Torres brothers. And a lot of that information came from the FBI, to be fair. So what the Torres brothers would do is they were financed. And I am telling you, they were financed by people, the same people that sort of financed the Symbionese Liberation Army with her and Patty Hearst and stuff. They were financed. And what the Torres brothers would do is they would go to Denver and they would buy the best guns you had in the world. They buy these guns. Okay? They would crate the guns and they'd put it on a Greyhound bus. And the Greyhound bus was headed for New York City. Of course, it may not be the same bus, but the bus would go and it would transfer. And good guns were coming in to the Black Liberation Army from Denver to the Torres brothers. So when I got out there with Nick, and it was only me and Nick, when I got out there and we decided not to drop the Torres brothers. Now, I'm going to get a laugh from you. Watch. Not to drop. So we didn't. And finally, when we had enough on a bullshit charge against the Torres brothers, and Nick made the collar, and the Torres brothers were sitting in Rikers Island. They were sitting in Rikers Island, ready to come in to be arraigned and so forth and so on. So Nick, along with the district attorney, John Kiernan, makes arrangements. I did not. Makes arrangements, and they're going to go and interview the Torres brothers, right? I'm saying it's a Wednesday, right? Tuesday, the FBI swooped into Rikers Island, took the Torres brothers, and we couldn't find them.
Wow.
And we could not find the Torres brothers.
Wow.
We could not. We couldn't find them.
Wow.
We caught up to them. We caught up to them later on in San Francisco, but we didn't make that collar.
Who made that call, huh? Who made that call to the FBI?
Could never find out. Could never find out. So, am I putting out conspiracy theories? No, I'm putting out facts.
Yeah.
I'm putting out facts. Nobody knows. Nobody knew how the Black Liberation Army had such good guns, how they financed themselves. And by the way, I went to St. Louis in the bank shootout in St. Louis when they were trying to finance themselves through the bank. And one of them, called Shasha Brown, he was shot, and killed. And one of the bullets that was in him was from Piagentini's gun. And we recovered Piagentini's gun.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so they had taken Piagentini's gun and they were using it in a pickup. And in the shootout, I guess one of them shot
their own guy by accident.
Yep.
In St. Louis.
In St. Louis. Absolutely.
Wow.
In St. Louis.
So, and then Randy, and then bringing us back, you get the case, right? And could you just explain to everyone, they assign you not with your guys, they give you this Lieutenant Muldoon or whatever. And
he was an inspector.
Oh, he was an inspector? All right.
In real life.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But could you just tell everybody what your orders were in the case? How, like, the restraints that you were put on you to solve the case? What they said you can't do. You're going to get this case, Randy, but this is what you can't do this.
Right. So I met with him that morning, and he put down the rules. Everything goes through me. You report to me. I understood it. What you can't do is you can't go to the mosque. Before he got finished, I said, "But Inspector," and he put up his hand. He said, "Listen to me. You can't go to the mosque. You cannot interview. You cannot interview superior officers. You cannot interview superior officers here unless I don't know, another superior officer was present. I have no intention of interviewing superior officers whatsoever. You can't go to the mosque. You can't do that." And I wound up in saying, I understand that there's a missing gun. There's an alarm out. for a missing gun. I said, I can't go to the inquire about that. He was, at that point, he was sort of dumbfounded. And he leaned forward to me and he said, "What alarm?" I said, "There's an alarm out for a missing gun. One of the cops' gun was taken that day." I said, "Is the alarm?" And so I'm not to go to the mosque, even to conduct a search. Well, that's gone by now. That's done along the lines like that. And he said, "No." And I wasn't going to go any further. I wasn't going to go any further. And I knew from the get-go. I knew from the start. Honestly, I went downstairs. I had no idea of quitting and nothing like that. But I knew from then. I said, I should have listened to my partner. And my partner said, "Don't take this case." And he listed 3 or 4 detectives that took the case and left. They left off the case. I don't on account of him or whatever. Don't do it. Don't take this case. That's what he said. And that's what I was saying downstairs. And there's nobody to turn to wipe this off on, to wash it off. Did you believe like a partner? No, I had the case alone. And on top of that, you give me the deceased officers that he has to, and you to work with him. I mean, he was a physical wreck. He was mentally wrecked. What he would do is every day he would go in and he'd look over the newspapers, and he was making files on the newspapers. They had some things. Now, you guys are superior officers. You exactly know what a DD5 is. It's answering up or substituting the 61. There were DD5s that said, interviewed 3 Muslims today, NA, non-helpful, Who were the Muslims? What were their names? Who were they?
Interview them? What time? Yeah.
Okay, I'm telling you, this was on DD5s. And
wow.
This is Vito. And what does he know?
And he's personally involved.
Oh,
so
God.
he shouldn't be investigating the case that he's personally involved in and was a victim of it. I mean, even you yourself probably
he's a cop. He's a cop, and I'm not against cops.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many homicides were solved by cops. Cases that I had, no, but he's not an investigator. He's not somebody to interview suspects or whatever the hell it was. So Vito, I found jobs for Vito to go off and do. Of course, wherever I went, whatever precinct I went, of course, Vito went, and it really was disrupting. Herman Kluge, what a sweetheart of a detective. I would do anything and he'd do anything for you. And when I went into the 2-5, and they had moved, and of course now the 2-5 was the head of the division. And he said to me, "Randy," he says, I said, "I know." Don't bring Vito in here. So yeah, that's what I was carrying around. That's what I was looking, and I had these restrictions. But you'd have done the same thing. Any detective would have done the same things. You know what? I did it. No, I didn't go to the mosque, but I did it. Who you going to interview? How you going to do? I didn't. I went and did it. I called guys while they were working. Guys from the 3-2. Come on down. And of course, the captains, whoever it was the Cardillo case. Yeah, go ahead. I didn't tell him, because that was not going to happen. That was, you submit a piece of paper to me, who you're going to interview and stuff. So, but I found ways. And yes, inevitably, I put myself in a position of, I did. But no. And the worst thing that I did, and that was one of the charges. I pulled a Donald Trump. I took all the records and I went down to somebody that I knew in show business, and he gave me an office. I was calling cops. It was on 56th Street and 8th Avenue, right across from 20th Century. Where 20th Century had a building right there. So, yep, I did. Awesome. And he's the guy that built the model that they used in the trial. He built the model of the mosque, and I would have the guys come down. Where were you? Yeah, I took all those records. I didn't get caught. Yep.
I mean, you were trying to solve. You were trying to solve a guy's homicide you worked with. Not a lot of people would have did that.
But you know what? This is me and you, right? You don't do that. You don't come up with phony Dukas Takem papers and then put Vito in a uniform and send Vito over to CBS and say, get the footage. Get which I did. I got. I said, and of course Vito didn't know. He thought it was real. Yeah, and they did. I didn't try that with NBC. I knew that they were too smart. So I went over to NBC, and I threw myself on the mercy of NBC, and she said, no, really, we can't do this. It takes a court order and stuff. I said, I appreciate it. I said, I really do appreciate it. I got back to my office. I'm telling you the truth. I got a phone call. Oh, you forgot something. You forgot something down here. And I went back to NBC to see what I forgot. And there they were. And there was the film. So,
listen, but you broke rules, and maybe they were laws, but like morally, you're trying to solve a homicide. I mean, and the city of New York, the people who should be having your back really do not have your back at that time. They're actively working against you, and you were there that night. Phil. Phil's wife came to visit you in the hospital, right? Every day, right?
Every day.
And you're working out of. I'm sorry, that's integrity. Like you bended some rules to get the job done. That's what integrity is. You didn't fall down, and you saw the wrong in it, and you were trying to make it right. So I'm just gonna say right now, I get what you're saying. Yeah, you broke the rules, and it's not right to take the case files out. But I commend you, and honestly, it might not be right in the eyes of man, but I think in the eyes of God, I think you'll be absolved of that.
I agree. Listen, I'm a firm believer. Arnold Schwarzenegger says it. The key to success, rules were made to be broken. And you had to break those rules to get to where you are. I mean, I'm curious. So here you are. You get the case in the bathroom. You get all these rules. You can't go to the mosque. What are you thinking to yourself? Because I would think to myself, clearly they don't want me to solve this case, just send me on a goose chase. What are you thinking at this point? Is that what you're thinking?
First, let me say this. Yeah, I broke the rules. In the first place, guys, your superior officer, in the first place, those rules should have never existed.
Exactly.
Those rules
exactly.
They should have never been. They should have never been there. They should have never been there in the first place. And you know what? It's not so much. I don't know the percentage. To solve this case is a total and complete, spelt in capital letters, embarrassment to the mayor, to the police commissioner, to the high-ranking officers. That's exactly what it is. And let me tell you something. When they went to the special prosecutor's office, they in so much as said that. They said, Selwyn Rabb wrote that in the New York Times, about superior officers. They didn't remember. They lost this file. They couldn't do that. No, yes, that's the reason. It was like, I was the first one to say this, but then I've heard a lot of other guys say the same thing. They circled the wagons, right? But they began firing in instead of firing out. You know what I mean by that? I mean, guys quitting left and right. And oh, yeah. Oh, but in any case,
I mean, they should have been fired. Honestly, that's corruption. It's corruption at the highest level. Like you're impeding in an investigation of a cop's murder or anyone's murder for that point. You're impeding an investigation to whatever the reason is, for political gain or to keep civil unrest in the community. Whatever you want to say, they broke the rules. They broke the law. They broke the law.
Let me leave you with this. We all know what happened back then. We definitely do. I mean, I'll use the word scared. And there was some exodus back then. There's always been an exodus. But what I see, that 14 guys, 14 cops left this job and went to Denver. It's in the paper. There was 3 that were given $5,000 each, right, to move and stuff. They're in Florida. They're doing podcasts in Florida. They're making more money. The exodus of what's leaving the police department. And these outside organizations, they're not stupid. They know what they're getting. They know what they're getting. And so now I see that, besides the retirement, besides the people that are leaving, if you see the in column, the out column is far exceeding, the in column. Already I've heard that we're 1,700, the Wall Street Journal, we're 1,700 police officers short.
More than that.
It's by far worse than that. Yeah.
It's a lot more. They're hiding it. They're completely hiding it. I mean, Randy, I just want to ask you one thing. We got Eric Adams, right? A former person who was paid to be a police officer. He, at one time when he was a cop, he lobbied David Dinkins to have Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam security and housing projects. What were your thoughts at that time when you heard that? I'm sure you heard it around that time. You were already off the job already at that point.
It was Eric Adams. It was Eric Adams. There was a lot of movies that were being made in New York City. And a lot of the security was retired police officers. Even police officers that were present got the right, wrote with the papers to get a day off and to work with the movie company. This fast, right? This fast. You know who was guarding the movie company? Muslims. All the Muslims. It started with a picture call across on 10th Street. All Muslims were there in the security. And guess what? They weren't getting paid. It was like one lump sum that went to wherever it went to. They weren't getting paid. People like Joe Cirillo and them that I know, they were out of business. They were doing all the security. Now the Muslims were doing the security. Look, I know Eric Adams. Do I know him personally? Yeah, I guess I do. I know Eric Adams when it goes back to when I was working with black detectives and stuff like that, when he made that 100 Black Detectives organization. He started to move the 100 black men. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep. 100 blacks in law enforcement who care.
That caused a lot of bullshit or whatever. Yeah, it was Eric Adams. I happen to know that Eric Adams was in the housing, and he was a lieutenant. And when the police department gobbled up the housing, and he promoted himself to captain and came into the police department. He lasted 60 days, and he was put back to lieutenant. He was put back within the police department to lieutenant. Do I blame him for doing something like that? No. Now, I have been told, whether it makes a difference or not, Eric Adams never made an arrest. Eric Adams was not in court, not at all.
No, well, I think
his son.
He's got 11 to his name, but we all know he never put the handcuffs on. That was your sergeant walking him over. You're going to take this collar. Like, we all know that. He has 11, which is 6 more than Pat Lynch, who has 5. But
Oh,
Sorry,
God. Hey, guys, I want you to know I'm having fun.
yeah. No.
Good. Hey, Randy, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Could you tell us, based on the politics you've been watching now, what mirrors what happened with the politics back in your day? What do you think what's going on now definitely mirrors or is similar to what you
I'll clean this up. I'll clean it up, right? Nobody likes a cop. That's it. Nobody. Back then, pigs or whatever, we wore a shirt that said pride, integrity, and guts. Pride, integrity, and guts. Yeah. I got into trouble. I could go and just hold on a second.
Yeah. Take it.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah.
What a story. This is
Unreal.
amazing. I'm getting chills.
When WINS was playing oldies in 1972, suddenly they went to a radio station, and they say this today: "You give us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world." Okay.
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. So I made the sign up and I hung it, and it says, "Give me 22 minutes and I'll give you a homicide."
Randy, can you throw it in front of your face? I just want to see it. We can't see it.
Yeah, can we see it?
I hung it up. I hung it up in front of on the 2-8. You give me 22 minutes and I'll give you a homicide. I hung it up on the entrance to the 2-8, and the boss let that go. Then when Channel 5 came out and they said, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? This one they made me take down. I said, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your killer is? I hung that one up in the 2-8. That one they made me take down.
I mean, you guys are dealing with death, though. Multiple murders a day, 500 a year for 3 years. Great. And then I read in your book at one point you said that in the 3 years following the Cardillo incident, there were 20 homicides of cops, and 13 of them were linked back to the Black Liberation Army.
Yeah, and that happened within 18, 19 months. By then we had made up a big shot. Nick Cirillo, and this was not being done out of the police department. This was being done at the Manhattan DA's office. The Manhattan DA's office. Something I've been saying recently, and it's okay for me to say it now. After spending 3 days out in San Francisco with Bottoms in Washington, and John Cannon is the head of the Homicide Bureau back here in Manhattan on the Morgenthau. Now Hogan died, so we're sitting out in San Francisco. We're being treated very well, by the way. We go to San Quentin and we take these guys out. They were inspectors, not detectives. So we're sitting out there, and now we got to put them before that this is it. So we fly out 2 witnesses, both females. We fly them out, and a detective comes with them. And if we have the lineup, and she gets yep, and we fly her back, and at the time we're meeting with the FBI to make Herman Bell now number 1. To make Herman Bell. New York FBI would not make Herman Bell, but they did in San Francisco. And I'm telling you, Nick Cirillo, he did all this. I sort of tagged along, and he comes to me and he says, Randy, and we got them in a holding cell. He says, Randy, I just heard from John Cannon. And I said, yeah. And he said, they don't have the money to fly us back.
Okay, we'll stay.
We had no money. We had no money to fly back. 2 guys that were already indicted for the killings of the cops. Bottoms in Washington. Of course, Washington would die of pancreatic cancer. Bottoms got out 2 or 3 months ago. 2 or 3 months before that, Herman Bell got out and joined the Democratic Party. But yeah, so I said, "What do you mean, Nick?" He says, "No." He says, "They don't have the money to. They don't have the money to fly us back." I said, "Nick," I said, you're." He says, "Randy, I'm serious." I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" And I'll tell you, the San Francisco PBA or whoever the hell it was came up with the money.
Wow.
San Francisco came up with the money. And we had 4 detectives. We had 5 detectives and 2 prisoners. And so we left 2 detectives. There wasn't enough money. Now listen to this. There's a guy, his name is Murphy, and he's an airline pilot, and he's the cousin of one of the inspectors out there, right? He has a meeting with Nick, and he says, "Get on my plane. I'm taking you guys back."
Wow.
And we did. And we got on the plane. And I'll tell you, when we got on the plane, because we thought we were going to have to leave too, when we got on the plane, he walked back and he said to Bottoms in Washington, he says, "Let me tell you something. If you're scared shit," he says, "you should be scared shit. So get up now and take that shit, because you're not getting out of the seats until we get to New York." Bottoms was just sitting there looking at me, and I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" And they just sat there. They sat there. We took them back. And Mike DeSalvatore walked from San Francisco to New York up and down the aisle, just walked up and down the aisle, shaking his head up and down the aisle, up and down. And we were supposed to come in quietly, right?
Yeah.
When we got off the airplane, oh my God. You ever see these scenes in the movies? The photographers, and it just was supposed to, we never said anything to anybody. John Cannon wanted it held down in the low until, we secured what we had to secure with these people. That's it. Then I also, huh? Then I also, I had also heard, and it was legitimate, that while we were out there and we were going to fly back, that they had made some threats. The Black Liberate made some threats to the whatchamacallit, to the airlines, that they would blow up the airline or do whatever they were going to do, whatever it was. But yeah. Hey, look, it may be a different it may be a different page, but basically there's a lot on this page here of the 70s, of the 70s, and it may all center around. It came to a head, I guess, on the Cardillo case. You know what I'm saying? It probably all came to a head, but it's really been called the New York City Police Department's blackest day.
Yeah, I mean, it's
darkest day.
I'm not gonna lie. When I was done with your book, I felt like throwing up. I'm not kidding. I really did. I was like, I can't even believe that this happened, and I didn't know about it. I was born in 1980, so was Eric. I'm like, I can't believe that this happened, and I didn't know about it. I know about the Cardillo murder, but I didn't know about the facts surrounding it and how. Really, I mean, I think the prologue when I read, I think it really. You nailed it in that minute. I mean, it was like that they turned their back on, like the city turned their back on the police. And the one thing that I'll say when I read your book, like my biggest takeaway was, and I spoke to Eric about it offline, was that at least you had the district attorneys working with you. Like,
not today.
And that's what I said. I said, could you imagine today? Like, we're screwed. I'm like, they hate us.
Yeah, Morgan Dorr and Hogan and people like that, they got to be turning over. You know what I'm saying? It's really, there's such a thing as whether it's misfeasance or malfeasance. So certainly, nonfeasance belongs to these people. Nonfeasance means you're not doing your job.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And you were seeing it right now. Actually, we were talking offline. So the department had just came out with a thing called Project Reset. So if you're a first-time offender for certain crimes, which pretty much is stuff you would get a desk appearance ticket for, the DA's office will not prosecute and give you a second chance. But John and I were talking about it. So how did the DA's office and the police department come up with this? The DA's office is not supposed to intervene and come up with social programs. Their job is to prosecute for the people. So it's just crazy times. And that's the part John and I were talking about. It's just, as crazy as things were, you had all these cops getting killed and the politics and them impeding your investigation, you still had the DAs on board. And if, God forbid, we're at that point now, we don't even have that. I mean, you have nothing.
It's all really, and all the guys, from my era, there's a lot of us left, including the FBI agents that I work with. It's almost like they've thrown in the towel. You know what I'm saying? As far as they're concerned, the city's gone. The city is gone.
Do you still stay in touch with some of these guys? Do you still have a relationship, a friendship with some of these guys you worked with?
Especially Joe Pistone. Yes. I'm a Roman Catholic, and when my daughter was 2 weeks old, she was baptized in our Italian church here, and Joe Pistone is her godfather. Yeah. So, oh yeah. So I know Joe. Oh yeah. We worked a kidnapping case together where we got some proclamation out of Massachusetts for a job well done. He and I worked it. She was 12 years old. Yeah, we got her back. Yeah. So yeah, I know. I know these guys. Rudy Andre. Now Vito Navarro. You know who Vito Navarro is, right?
Yes.
On
yes.
New Year's Day, his wife passed away.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Rudy's still with us. But Negron is not. So I will just say this about Negron. Negron is no longer with us. Negron drank himself to death, having nothing to do with the mosque. Remember when I said he was waving the gun and with the... Yeah. Okay, so yeah. So Padilla is with us, but he's had a situation with his brain. He's fine. He's okay. So, but so many are gone. They're really gone. I mean,
but your story lives forever. I will say that. I'm actually, John. I'm glad you said it. I actually feel I'm kind of shocked that when I joined the New York City Police Department, I didn't know. I knew about Philip Cardillo. We know about most of the police officers that you should remember, and but I didn't know the story. And I think about it. I spent about 8 years on the job till I finally read the story. I said, "Wow, I can't believe I've been on the job this long, and I didn't even know that this actually happened." It was just shocking to me. I said I should have known about that as soon as I entered the police academy. And that's why John and I said that we recommend that everyone, it should be mandatory that if you enter the police academy, your book should be mandatory as part of your graduation requirements. You should have to read that book and have a good understanding of the nomenclature of the police department and how politics could play a role.
Yeah.
Well, this time it's for real, but it will by the end of the year, it will hit somewhere. I seriously doubt as a film, but right now they're aiming for 4 hours on cable, but it also could be a 4-hour doc, but played by actors.
Gotcha.
Not me talking or Vito talking or whatever. So, and I know something's going to happen because they had to go in their pocket.
Yeah.
They had
Good.
to go in their pocket to option to get certain. Yes.
Good.
So
Good.
yeah,
Listen, this should be on film. Honestly, this is a very dark time in New York City history, and I don't think the public really understands what police officers go through. And honestly, reading your story, I mean, listen, your generation was definitely tougher than ours. Like I always say, we're a weak generation. We're a weak generation of men. You fought in war. You know, you won the Bronze Star. You won the Purple Heart. But listen to me. The stuff that they put you through. I mean, you had $50,000 on your head. You had the mayor of New York and the police commissioner coming after you for you to try to solve a case. I mean, the stress that you were under. I mean, we had an officer kill himself today. You know, we just had an officer. He jumped
really.
he jumped off the 16th floor left rack. You know, young kid. You know, I mean, we see suicide a lot today. It's really not talked about. I mean, and honestly, you're a strong person. You're a great example for people that there's life after this job. There's life on this job, and there's life after this job. And honestly, because you did do the right thing. Like you found Philip Cardillo's killer. I know the case didn't turn out, and that was not because of you. That was because of the people, the higher ups that were on that scene that day should be ashamed of themselves. They sold their soul. They should be ashamed. They crushed that case. You solved that case.
So, but I heard what you said. The dark days and the police department in trouble, and the city is. Isn't that happening right now? Not to switch gears. Isn't the city of New York in trouble?
Absolutely.
Isn't the city of New York virtually running out of money? Isn't people running from the city like there's no tomorrow? And stop blaming COVID and stuff like that. It's crime. It's the high prices. You're looking away to take our medical benefits, force us into a plan that we really we really don't want, and stuff like that. And please, the police department, come on. Look
what's said about that, Randy? What you're saying is 100% true, because John and I have watched Chief Kemper, who's now the new transit chief of the New York City Police Department, just blatantly lied through his teeth through an interview on New York One, and the reporter was Dean Meminger, and he asked him about what's going on in the streets and about safety, and it was a complete lie when they're comparing numbers. But what was said was, in his narrative, he blames the cops just as you guys were blamed back then. And he says that they talked about the felony assaults, the increase of assaults, and he blames that the felony assaults have seen a 40% increase, but that 40% increase was assaults on cops, but only when the cops were taking action. So almost blaming the cops. Again, the cops are always getting blamed. They're getting blamed now. They were getting blamed then. It's just unfortunate that we keep going on this wheel. The cops always seem to get blamed, and they're going out there with their hearts and their minds in the right places. Well, I mean, what do you think when you hear something like that?
Well, what they're doing again, is they're like circling the wagons. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not. You saw the shakeup in the police department. Wow. Eileen lost her job. She was a sweetheart. She was so good to us. Just trust me. I'm a Purple Heart recipient, and we have meetings and stuff like that. She gave us the 2-4 precinct to have the meetings in, and we did. We had them did. I mean, those people, you're gone. All of those, and they've replaced all of them. Now, I'll tell you a rumor. I hear that the PC may be going.
Oh, that's a strong rumor, and he wants to put Phil Banks in. That's it.
I'm glad you heard the same thing I did, because I didn't even want to put up that give that name. Yeah. Somebody's got to take the fall for what is really going on, And I could see the way that this inspector just got up and talked, So if the police take less action, we're going to have less felonious assaults. In essence, is that street talk instead of the legalese that they use?
Exactly.
Well, guess what?
Exactly.
Well, you know, well, guys, is all lost? Is the pendulum going to come back the same way and stuff like that? Jesus, I hope so. I hope so, because, I mean, I really, like you, and I know you'll admit this. For all its faults and warts and stuff like that, Jesus, I was proud, and I love to be, and we weren't called police officers back then. I loved to be a cop. I had really liked it. I was proud. I couldn't wait to go home and show my mother my shields. Hey, look what I got, Mom. And then, of course, when I made detective, I thought my father's chest was going to bust. You know what I'm saying? So, to me, I look back, and maybe you guys are the same way. I couldn't have been anything else than what I was, and I loved it. And so, with that kind of emotion and stuff like that, it's just really a shame of what is happening, to our city and and to our job. I somebody else told me this years and years and years ago. Hey guys, we didn't have a job. We had a career. We had.
I agree 100%.
We had a career.
I was even with the even in the position I was put in. I made the decision to retire because I was under the pressure of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. I actually got 8 sets of charges in my last year. And as a lieutenant, I used to say to my guys, I'm not a lieutenant. I'm a cop that leads other cops. I was proud to be a cop. I love doing police work, but I had to leave because the Civilian Complaint Review Board would not let me do police work anymore. And the same thing with John. John had to leave because the city doesn't want him to do police work. And they lost 2 intelligent lieutenants that want to do police work, and they're losing more. It's a constant battle. They're losing quality people that are capable to do the job. And I'm glad that you're keeping up to current events. I'm really impressed.
All right.
Yeah.
So, guys, what we have talked here is, I don't care how you expose it or where you put it or something like that. But guys, you can't sell this. Please, you can't sell this to anybody.
No, we don't sell. No, it's a podcast.
No,
we put it out for view. Yeah. We're not selling anything.
Because contractually, I'm not supposed to speak about this while people own this. You know what I'm talking about? And they do own it. And I just told you, by the end of the year, we're going to see something.
Yeah, no,
so,
we're not selling anything. This is just a podcast. We put it out for free.
Total and complete trust here, guys. No problem at all.
It's it's just we started this basically to push back, to change the narrative. When someone's saying, "Oh, it's not a riot," no, that was a riot, and we'll break down all the incidents. We break down police incidents.
As much as we've discussed here about the 70s, guys, I think there's a lot of podcasts about 2022, 2021. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really, really do.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. But listen, we don't want to hold you all night.
Okay.
It was an absolute honor. You're a legend in the police department.
Guys, thank you for having me, and thank you for the job that you guys are continuing to do. And I really mean that. It's not a mutual admiration society here. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Likewise, we're not here to make any money. We're just here to seek the truth. And our message is to be the catalyst for change, to change the Civilian Complaint Review Board, to change the vaccine mandate, and to actually boost morale. We just lost a police officer's life today to suicide, and that's been a huge problem. We want to be the catalyst for change and really help these police officers and these cops that are out there. So, Randy, I have nothing but admiration for you. You're a really impressive guy.
All right, guys.
All right, Randy. It was a pleasure, my friend. If you could just do us a favor, could you just leave us with the last word and your message, whoever you want to say it to, the cops, the world, whatever.
Okay. I I strongly, strongly support, love, um, and guys, take care of yourselves. I mean, you belong to the greatest group, uh, if not in the United States, in the world, that you are a, New York City police officer. Trust me. And I know you will not do anything to shame the badge. You will not. Uh, I love you guys. If there was some way that we could swing it around, that you could do your job, or you were supported better than what you are. Just remember, there's a group of us that really went through this, and quite a few of them lost their lives, and we got through it. We got through it the same that you will. Just please, hang in there and just know who you are. You are a New York City police officer. We love you guys.